By the closing of the 31st millennium, the storm unleashed at Isfahan had swollen into a full-scale galactic conflagration, and at its apex stood Horus Lupercal, Warmaster turned arch-traitor. His legion, the Sons of Horus, leading a war host, the likes of which Terra had never seen, and may never see again. The culmination of that dreadful crusade would unfold upon the cradle of mankind itself, Terra. 7 standard years had passed since the Warmaster's betrayal. In that time, the Imperium had bled, worlds had burned, legions shattered, and trust turned to naught but ash. Now, the Loyalists and traitors' forces stood converged upon Holy Terra. For the Loyalists, every available legion not already committed elsewhere tore through the Imperium, driven by a desperate hope to reinforce the throne world. For the traitors, this was the time to strike their final death blow. The assault began with a terrifying precision. Fleets darkened the skies above the Sol system as Horus's forces gathered. His chosen spearhead, the Sons of Horus, were granted the highest honor, despite Angron's grumbling, to be the first to breach the Imperial palace. At their head stood First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon. His was a burden of legacy, a bitter honor of leading his father's war against the master of mankind. What followed would be a siege of an apocalyptic scale. Terra became a veritable furnace of war. Its surface became split open by constant orbital bombardment. Void war and attritional slaughter devoured millions upon millions by the hour. Abaddon led the 16th Legion's assault columns into the very teeth of the palace's defenses. The Emperor's custodians, unsuccessful as they seemingly are, his Praetorians, alongside the remnants of the Loyalist legionaries who were able to arrive, gave no ground without a pound of flesh and rivers of blood being spilt. Above this hellscape loomed the vengeful spirit, the personal battle barge of Horus Lupercal. It was here, amidst the echoing corridors of that abysmal vessel, that destiny reached its breaking point. However, there are a few moments that should be covered surrounding the siege, in particular, how the traitor Primarchs and their legions acted during different stages of the siege. Before the proper land invasion of Terra, the traitor Primarchs gathered to discuss the final stages. At this point, those who had been corrupted by chaos are barely recognizable, and it frustrates others like Perturabo. However, the 16th Legion's very own identity is allowing them to consolidate their movements towards a single goal. And so things would follow. Barely had the group gathered when Angron launched into a familiar tirade. When do we attack? He thrust his head closer to the imaging equipment, reducing his communication phantom to a single glaring eye. Why do we sit here in the void when our weapons cannot harm our father? We must land, take the fight to him. With blade and fist, the god of battle demands blood. Horus stared at Angron with a baleful eye. He allowed his brother to rant on. We smashed aside Dorn's feeble defenses, Angron said. We broke Luna in days. Why now do we slink around the throne world like curs, waiting for Mortarion when victory is in our grasp? We smashed Dorn's defenses. Perturabo's laden response simmered with anger. I broke Dorn's gate, not we. Your sons did not bleed to ensure our successes. You gave no plan to penetrate the system's defenses. I delivered the Sol system to the Warmaster. You claim the role in a victory you are not party to. Did you forget that I had to drag you back from your orgy of bloodletting to rejoin our brother? Were it not for me, you would not be here. Fulgrim would not be here. None of you would be here now. You have done your part, little digger. Angron scoffed. Land the legions now. Let me be the point of the spear aimed at our father's heart. Cease this game. Bombardment is a weakling's ploy. Perturabo stiffened, taking the comment personally, which was surely Angron's intention. Attempt to land and see how quickly father's guns tear you to pieces, said Perturabo. Silence, said Horus. His voice was hardly louder than a whisper, but it brought immediate quiet. You will be silent now. All of you. All proceeds to plan. Perturabo, explain, said Horus. Angron snorted when Perturabo began. Horus cowed him with a glance. 3 things stand in our way, Perturabo began. The palace guns, the palace aegis, and father's will, which keep the Neverborn at bay. These problems cannot be resolved at once and must be dealt with in order, beginning with the ages. The bombardment patterns I have devised have revealed multiple shortcomings in the palace's shields. Between the hours I spent each day fortifying the outer reaches against our brother's coming, tasks not one of you have taken upon yourself, he grumbled. I have been examining Auspec's soundings of the Void Shield network. Then let us sit down and lead our warriors in a glorious charge against the walls, growled Angron. That would result in your total destruction, either on descent or on the ground, coward. Be patient, brother, said Perturabo. You will have your glory. The shields cannot be broken. They cannot be starved of power, but they can be weakened. Eventually, when the siege would be joined by other traitor legions, including the Third, some fractures within the traitors' cohesion would begin to appear more clearly, in particular those involving the Third Legion and the Sons of Horus. One of these instances would go as follows. Why do you wait? Lord Eidolon asked. Abaddon glanced at the Third Legion champion. Eidolon's retinue trailed him, wretched and gaudy, in their enhanced and augmented breastplate. Their faces, and in some cases their forms, had grown wildly misshapen. Their adopted color schemes hurt his eyes. They were the cream of the Phoenicians' men, the Emperor's children, grotesquely and excessively ornate. Haughty bastards, why did they preserve the name? Did Fulgrim fear offending his father somehow? Names could be changed. There was honor in that. When the time demanded, wolves became sons, sons of a better father. Respect, Abaddon suggested. Also, there is a wonderful view, said Horus Aximand. Respect of what? Asked Eidolon. His voice was unnatural, sonically phased, as he regarded the four warriors of the Mournival and the row of black burnished Justerian Terminators standing honor guard behind them. Abaddon could almost smell his scorn, and the look in Eidolon's eyes spoke of the very special place he kept in his heart for the 16th Legion, a place swimming with contempt. There is work to be done, I am aware, said Abaddon. My beloved lord grows. Many more supple breaths every day, asked Aximand. Kribe snorted loudly. Don't goad him, little one, said Abaddon, smiling despite himself. It really must put our good Lord Perturabo off his stroke if we started brawling with our brothers while he worked. He looked at Eidolon. Besides, it might dent that lovely armor, which would be a terrible shame. Later, after much struggle, as the Sons of Horus are using an assault drill in order to attack under the Saturnine Gate, in what is to be known as part of the Saturnine Gambit, a plan conceived by both Perturabo and Ezekiel Abaddon, things start to veer off course, and more fractures would be created. The Plutona drivers had advised Lev Goshen that there were 2 minutes from their target point, but those 2 minutes seemed to have stretched. The craft was floundering. It felt like it was in the belly of a dying fish that was too weak to swim against a current. Everything swayed and pitched, screeched and roared. The screech roar of the drill heads had become a muffled sputter. The motivators were straining, finding nothing to bite. It sounded as though they were gurgling uselessly through the mud. We're moving backwards, said Gossen. How can we be moving backwards? My lord, said the tech priest. Tell me, Gossen snapped. The indicator systems, lord. They show we're submerged, the Magos said. In what? In a flow of viscous fluid, said one of the drivers. Like what? Magma? Mud? Sensors read an artificial substance, the Magos said. He had come to the prow in order to work at a cramped technical station beside the helm. His dendritic fingers had conjoined with the station's port, and he was reading off data off the insides of his eyelid that had been shuttered shut, analyzing structure, composition, properties. I don't need a scolium thesis, you turd, said Gossen. I require immediate delivery to the target vector. That is not possible, said the Magos. We are immobilized. Don't tell me what's possible, warned the captain of the 25th Company. We are immobilized, replied the Mechanicum Adept. We are suspended in a body of material similar to liquid form rockcrete. Our motivators and drills cannot gain traction. It is fast setting. Get us free. That is no longer possible, my lord. Open the damned hatches. We will flood. We are submerged. I refer you to my earlier answer. Gossen tried to think of another question, another demand he could make. He could not think of anything. The walls of the compartment seemed very tight suddenly. He was enclosed with 50 battle-ready space marines. There was barely enough room to move as it was. Plutona had stopped moving. The silence was the worst thing Gossen had ever heard. How long, he asked. How long for what, Lord? Until it sets. It's already setting, my lord. Then, when it sets, when it's solid, can we dig our way through it? The Magos turned to look at him with stitched up eyes. The material is inside our fairing, our drill cases, and our engines. The beautiful mechanisms will never run again. The material has not penetrated this compartment because this compartment is a sealed unit. We cannot open the hatches. We cannot dig out. We will never move again. And no one can dig us out. No one is coming. Almost no one knows we're here. Lev Gossin couldn't process what he had been told. He sat in his arrestor seat. He started with the basics. How long, Lord, will our power last? 169 days, said the Magos. Air, with recirculation and given your gene-bred biology, said the Magos, effectively indefinitely. Gossin nodded. How long do your kind live? The Magos asked. Why? Because that is how long you'll be here, said the Magos. As this was going on, 2 termite wrecks smoldered in Mortis Kappa, surrounded by the corpses of the Sons of Horus that they had tried to deliver. Har left his men checking for survivors and walked through the Arch Mortalis Lambda, where another termite wreck laid, surrounded by a ring of black armor dead. Garo standing with Baal Septus. The 2 kill squads, along with Garo's remnants, had combined to meet 3 simultaneous incursions. They had been mercilessly precise. 175 kills, said Har with a grin. Biggest haul yet. Only 9 of ours lost. You know, I wish I was able to see the dismay on their damned faces as they stepped into your sights. He paused. What? He asked. Septus was listening to his link. There's a stray one, Garo said to Har. Got through just one, Mournival, said Garo. Even so, he can't get far. He might as well be dead already. Septus looked at them. I have requested to be permitted to deploy and join the hunt. And, asked Har, I fancy getting some Mournival red on my fist. I hear they make the effort worthwhile. Garo snorted. If the main board remains clear of the target tracks for another 5 minutes. The bang of decompression drowned out his next words as they were bathed in frosty light. Sons of Horus snapped solid out of the air around them in the midst of these 2 kill teams. Throughout Kappa and Lambda, Cataphracti, First Company, 100 brothers of the infamous Justerian Terminator section, the most feared and notorious warriors of the entire 16th Legion. 100 warriors and First Captain Abaddon. Havoc ignited. The battle in Kappa and Lambda zones never left the limits of those joined killing chambers. It lasted 13 minutes. It was close, tight-packed, immediate, with no cover and no room for evasion. The Justerian regarded as the most mercilessly able of the Sons of Horus, a legacy that had been remarkable even in the time of the Luna Wolves. Against the Praetorians, 2 hand-picked kill teams. There was no quarter, no limit, no hope that any of them would walk away unscathed. The kill teams fought for Terra and for honor, driven by a deep hatred and long-lasting yearning for vengeance against those who had betrayed them. Abaddon and his Justerian personified that. The Justerian and their first captain abandoned any dreams of glory or famous victory within nanoseconds of arriving. They could plainly see that their gambit had failed. The loyalists had outplayed them and were waiting for them. The exhilarating promise of their ruse had evaporated. They fought for nothing more complicated than survival. Mutually assured surprise, mutually assured destruction, an instantaneous orgy of raw and savage killing. There was no range of any sort. Warriors found themselves pressed together, face to face, weapons blaze away, in circumstances that the doctrines of any legion, no matter their methodology, would have ruled for close quarters combat. Bolters roared point blank, detonating, men whose physical debris injured those around them, as if it were shrapnel. Plasma weapons and bulk lasers blasted against their plate, their scorching beams passing through 2 or more bodies at a time. Assault cannons were pressed to faces or the sides of heads and fired. Space Marines died standing, Cataphracti plate locked out, frozen, smashed like statues. Space Marines died explosively, burst apart with such force only scraps of them remained. The Justerian quickly tried to dominate through the brute power of their Terminator exoplate, swinging demolishing fists and scything blades at anything and everything, overpowering and smashing legionaries in more conventional suits of warplate. Heads crushed, limbs snapped, bodies tore. Some warriors died from 3 or even 4 simultaneous blows from as many opponents, but the kill teams had the likes of Garo amongst them, with the Libertas, which could cut anything, and Har, whose size and power fist wrecked Terminator panoply like foil. They had Belseptus and his avenging Ketchon paladins, who did not flinch and who had longed for worthy combat. Belseptus, in the thick of everything, believed he had found the glory his genes had predicted. He killed 2 Justarian Terminators in the first second and a half with the gleaming edge of Perosia. Abaddon killed with astonishing speed and meticulous efficiency. For the first 5 minutes of the fight, he merely tried to center his thoughts and reconcile the sudden reversal of his fortune. For the next 3, he began to believe the Justarian could prevail. They were the Justarian, after all. They were the best of the best, the angels of death beyond compare. They had never failed. They had never been overcome. There was no stage of war on which they could not triumph. He began to calculate the logistics. How would they break out? Where would they go? What would be the next step? Into the palace? Into the Sanctum Imperialis? Divide up? Run terror strikes to damage the Citadel? Conduct solo missions? It would take time for Dorn and Valdor to run them all to the ground in a maze like the Palatine. Perhaps the original Spearhead mission was doomed, for not all of them could reach the throne room, but there were other plans they could improvise. Other targets: the Sigillite, Valdor, Dorn, Bab, and the Grand Bastion. By the 4th minute, he had decided on the Aegis. There was no question. That would be their first target. They would break clear, leaving this rabble dead in their wake, and bring the Aegis down. That would be enough. That would end the siege of Terra. The palace would be open for bombardment from the fleet. Great Lupercal would raise it from orbit. The vengeful spirit would send down monumental beams of high energy and annihilate the Palatine and the throne within. In the 5th minute, Urok Great was decapitated by one of the Ketachan. Abaddon quickly hacked this killer apart, but the loss was psychological. His schemes seemed to recede like ghosts, like dreams, departing at sunrise. His vision of the Palatine bombardment grew distant and smaller and out of reach. In the 6th minute, killing without pause, Abaddon began to reevaluate the skill and tenacity, the rationally brilliant approach to warfare that had carried him every step of his long career and made him first captain of the finest company in the finest legion, the first amongst first, a name taken seriously even by the Primarchs, censored him like an access. They were cornered. They were trapped. They were being killed by the dozen. Not even the Justarian, not even they could prevail. Loyalist reinforcements would be coming, even if they killed every last bastard in the chambers. Their hopes were dashed. He voxed retreat to his surviving men. Activate homing beacons and get out. Pull back. Retreat now. Yes, the Sons of Horus were not above that. They were warriors, not fools. They knew to read the flow of a fight and act accordingly. They were no good to anyone dead. Damn the Imperial fists and their simplistic, no backward step. Only a fool never took a backward step. The Sons of Horus were more like the barbarian White Scars. Those heathen primitives got that much right. At least. Withdrawal to advance. There was always another day, and that other day might bring victory. If you stood your ground like a yellow-armored fool, you could not live to see it. By the 7th minute, Abaddon realized he was going to die. They had sent the homing signal repeatedly, once every 3 seconds. Standard protocol. Extraction orders urgent. No flare had come. Their signal might have been blocked. The monolith might have withdrawn from teleport range. No, the damn thing's grid had jammed. That was it. Abaddon could picture it. The filthy tech adept scum frantically scurrying around the termite cabin, trying to repair a burned out grid. His beacon flashing signals on the console. The teleport had failed so many damn times on the approach. The Magi had blamed it on the bedrock, on energy obstructions, on everything but themselves. It was their own miserable incompetence. They'd barely managed to get Abaddon and his men to the target. Now, the inadequate bastards couldn't get them back out. In the 8th minute, Abaddon decided that if he ever got out, if he did manage to somehow, he would track down and kill her. He would kill her and her entire warship for their ineptitude. He would hack off their heads and feet, load them into a teleporter grid, and transfer them unprotected into a hard vacuum, or the heart of a star, or an unset diffuse pattern, so the organic drizzle of their remains rained down on multiple sites at once. By the 9th minute, bleeding from a dozen wounds, 2 of them critical, he had resolved to kill the Lord of Iron too. If he got out, in that dream of escape, he would find Pedorabo and kill him. This had been his great idea. Pedorabo had seen the flaw. the Saturnine fault. He had toyed with it, cooed over it, revealed it to Abaddon furtively. He had galled Abaddon into this. He'd used the first captain with his reputation and his authority and his unraveled connections. He had used Abaddon to make this happen. Perabo, damn his soul, had played first captain Ezekiel Abaddon like a fool. He had tempted him with glory, made him feel smart and noticed, preened his ego, made him feel like it was all his big clever idea. The bastard even made Abaddon beg him to let him do it. The Lord of Iron, the Lord of Shit, had manipulated Abaddon into using his influences to draw resources from the Sons of Horus, coerce the Emperor's children into playing along, broker the help of the Mechanicum. He made Abaddon do all the work and take all the credit. So if it failed like it was failing now, Abaddon would be to blame. Perabo had the deniability if it turned to shit. Perabo could claim ignorance if 3 companies of the Sons of Horus, including the elites, not to mention how many damned Emperor's children had failed to return. In death, Abaddon would be blamed for the disaster and his memory dishonored. In death, he would be disgraced, called overreaching, called Abaddon the Fool. Abaddon would find the Lord of Iron in that dream escape from this hell pit. He would annihilate those damned war automata with Nultas, and he would face Perabo and tear his skull off his spine and ram the haft of Forgebreaker down the stump of his neck, keeping it there until the body split like a rotten gourd. In the 13th minute, Abaddon reached a point of calm, of serenity. He accepted his onrushing death, which was surely only seconds away. It had become a game, a contest, like the old practice cages. How many of them could he kill before he was bested? Some, most, all. Some were fine warriors. Septus, he was magnificent. Har was a brute, but an interesting challenge. Garo, Abaddon fancied his own chances in an even match, but the man's sword was a piece of work, and so was Garo's skill with it. He realized he killed and killed and killed and killed, that he owed the Lord of Iron a genuine debt of gratitude. Abaddon was a warrior. He had always been a warrior. He excelled at it. The warp was a distraction. It was just another weapon. Those who knelt before it and pledged their worship, treating it like some kind of god, they were fools. All of them. Magnus, Lorgar, Fulgrim, fools. Horus was a fool. The warp was nothing. Being a warrior was everything. It defined him. The skill of combat. The lessons of defeat. The joy of triumph. This was his sacrament. Let them worship their false gods and giggling abomination. This was what he wanted. The chance to fight, like a man, not a demon. The chance to take the palace and claim Terra, the old-fashioned way, by force of arms. He had wanted to win as a warrior. Perabo had let him try. He owed the Lord of Iron thanks for that. This was everything, he realized. He entered the 11th minute, with almost everyone dead. This moment, its simplicity, skill, and courage tested to the limit, for no other reason, to serve no grand plan or devious ruse, just tested for the sake of skill and courage. This moment was his life in purest form, his life distilled. He fought Ketchan and the Imperial Fists, and Black Shield, and Cataphracti Terminators, and Tactical Space Marines, for no other principle than to find out who was best. There were no sides, no good or bad, no rebel, cause, or loyalist alliance, no war master, no emperor, no point to anything outside the broken, bloodied smears on the walls of the killing chamber. Just war, only war. The binary test of the galaxy. You passed in triumph or failed in glory. Death, rushing closer, was immaterial. How many could he take? How many more times could he prove his prowess? By the 12th minute, Nathaniel Garo had reached him, and cleaved through the last of the Justerian. Eventually, Baal Septus also joined the brouhaha. Now it was a proper test, a dance of equals that carried them into the 13th and final minute, as their blades clashed and parried with such speed. The Blood Angel was amazing. The deftness of his skill, the precision of his strokes, the intensity of his address. Septus produced a nuanced swordplay that Abaddon could barely turn back. There were skills here to learn, tricks to appreciate and copy, and Kevon's attack was absolute. A miraculous degree of focus. Abaddon was sorry to kill him. His blade cut Septus in half. The Riven Hound slammed Abaddon into the wall. Bricks shattered, and Abaddon's organs began to rupture and bleed. Har's size and brute strength were what pushed him forward. There was no skill to speak of, just a beautiful fury, like one of Russ's pack dogs, or Angron's thug Karn. One more blow like that, and it was done. But Har was dead weight, pinning him to the wall. Abaddon's blade had found Har's throat and slid up into the brain and through the back of the Rivenhound's head. Abaddon could not move. He could barely hear or see, as Garo was back on him. One slashed down from the sword whose edge cut everything. Abaddon wanted it to never end. Garo lowered Libertas. No, he punched the line in the wall. Har's enormous corpse fell away as the teleport flare faded. Abaddon had been teleported, and rather than feeling joy, he wept at the glory that had been stolen from him by the Mechanicus. Eventually, when news got back to Horus that Perturabo's team had cost him a significant amount of his Justarian Terminator elite and uncountable numbers of Emperor's children, the fractures between the two began to widen. As the emissary for the Sons of Horus came to the Iron Lord, as he sat in the Dark Tower, obsessed with the macro host, Angonis strode before him into the command chamber. "I have orders for your Primarch," said Argonis, without breaking his stride. "From the War Master," said Phrox. Argonis did not answer, but Phrox thought he caught something across the Legionary's expression, a shadow of an emotion that should not have been there. Phrox recognized it. He had seen it before on the Vengeful Spirit, as they had entered Horus's presence. The stillness of the emissary's face had been sorrow. "Lord Perturabo, I bring word of the command from the War Master of Mankind." Perturabo did not respond or move. The data cadral hummed and span about the Primarch. Flows of endless code blinked across the screens as the machines buzzed, but the eyes of the Lord of Iron did not move. He had barely moved in the last 12 hours. 3 hours into that time, the Lord of Iron had stopped calling up fresh data shifts and report streams. He had just let the data wash over him, in whatever format it came. In the last 4, he had stopped issuing new commands. In the last 30 minutes, Fox had not even been sure if his lord was assimilating the data at all. But he had not moved from the cradle. It was as though a finality was creeping into Perturabo, a dreadful passivity in the face of whatever he was seeing. It was terrifying. "Mass errors within the strategic data flow," said Perturabo. "So many errors, points of corruption, that I can barely see the war." He looked at Argus, who spoke. "Lord, the War Master commands. It does not matter," Perturabo snapped as the Lord of Iron stood from the cradle. "I know what you are here to say, emissary. Before your sight dimmed, I saw it. It was in the troop movements, in the sensor flow. Too great a change not to be ordained." Perturabo's gaze held on to Angronis. The Primarch's armor purred. "But speak your words, equerry. Let it be done. You are ordered to move. You shall disperse your legion's warriors amongst the assault forces. You shall take command of the assault on the Sanctus wall section." Forex felt the breath become cold in his lungs. "The surge of forces is near completion," said Forex. "Without strategic oversight, how will we guide thee?" "I will not," said the Lord of Iron. Forex just watched the Primarch. Perturabo turned to look at the terminals. "Mortarion and the Death Guard are moving. They come here," said Perturabo. "Is that not so, emissary?" "It is the War Master's will. We are to be displaced." Forex could hear the disbelief cracked in the control of his voice. "We can see victory, and you would take its architects away just before it's complete. Who will order the battle?" "What are you saying, Lord?" asked Forex. "How long to stand here?" Perturabo asked in a low voice. "A lifetime, many lifetimes, as most mortals live them." He raised a hand. Servos whining. Exo-bracing armor plates shifting. His hand opened, metal-clad digits reaching delicately for distant towers of the unconquered palace. "I never wanted to be put to any of the uses you put me to, Father. All you have ever valued is destruction. All you have ever praised is weakness and pride. All I ever wanted has been taken." Perturabo's gaze distant, as though he were focusing beyond what he could see to some infinite distance. "He's just like you, Father. Horus, your bright son. You both made us want to serve you, and then you made us kill our dreams with our own hands. All the blood of your legion, all the red iron spilled. Was it worth it to go this far and go no further?" asked Andronis. "It was worth it to learn the truth. The universe does not care. We could bleed our last, and it would not matter. Pour the blood of my warriors into the earth, and it all grows, and all that grows is hunger for more. If you go," Anjanus spoke, "if you defy the will of Horus, then your ships will be burned from the stars." "They shall not," said Perturabo, "just as you shall not draw your gun and shoot me now. Though you should. Horus has bartered your strength for doubt and false promises. But our strength is still ours, and our iron is still true. you shall be outcast. He will hunt you down once the War Master has taken the throne. Perturabo paused. So be it, said the Lord of Iron. Perturabo turned his back and walked from the room. At his side, his iron circle. And so Horus had lost yet another asset. As the siege went on, Horus would lose more and more, eventually forcing a final gambit, placing his ship in a vector with its shields down, allowing the Emperor to teleport himself directly to confront his fallen son. And he met Horus in personal combat, despite what had transpired. It is recorded that the Emperor had hesitated, but Horus showed no such mercy, and the battle that followed would scar reality itself. Ultimately, the Emperor could not overcome Horus once fully vested with the concentrated power of the four dark gods. However, he was clever enough to trick them once again, this time by creating a vision of one of Horus's most cherished sons, tricking him into surrendering the power of the dark gods in order to slay the Emperor by his own hand, truly claiming glory not for the dark god, but rather for Horus Lupercal. However, this had been the exact hope of the Emperor, as he slew Horus with one final gambit, one which not only injured Horus, not only ended Horus's mortal life, but also deeply wounded the Emperor, far more than he had been wounded during their duel, leaving him in a near-death state. The Master of Mankind had been mortally wounded and recovered by his loyal guards, and interred within the arcane mechanisms of the Golden Throne, a techno-arcane sarcophagus sustained by the tithes of 1,000 psychers a day. With Horus dead, the traitor forces fragmented, and reeling from the loss of their leader, they began their chaotic withdrawal from the Sol system. In confusion, the shattered remnants of the 16th Legion had recovered Horus's body from the vengeful spirit, and escaped into the warp, vanishing into the Eye of Terror. In that warped sanctuary of unreality, the Sons of Horus built their tomb fortress, a world devoted to their slain Primarch, and from which they would persecute the next phase of the war. Thus began the Long War. Thus the first steps in the Black Crusades were laid. It was in this maelstrom of loss and betrayal that Ezekiel Abaddon stepped forward, no longer just the first captain. He became the de facto heir of Horus's legacy, though not by name, refusing to allow the memory of Horus to change the future. Abaddon renamed the 16th Legion to the Black Legion, and in doing so he cast off the shadow of his dead Primarch, and declared himself the new War Master, the War Master of Chaos Undivided. With the dark blessings of the ruinous powers upon him, Abaddon the Despoiler began his new campaign to finish what Horus had started, the eradication of the Imperium and the final fall of the Emperor. However, unlike his father, he did not view the ruinous powers as gods or deities, but rather tools or weapons to use. What he had realized in the Saturnine Gambit would shape how he would prosecute his war. Where once Horus had led a crusade born of wounded pride, Abaddon led one forged of cold resolve, and the Imperium, already scorched and staggering, braced for the long night that would follow. To this day, the true cost of the Siege of Terra is calculated, but never fully comprehended. The echoes of that apocalyptic confrontation still reverberate across the stars, and the throne upon which the Emperor sits remains both a beacon and a tomb. Eventually would come the second siege of Chthoniya. Chthoniya had once been the cradle of the 16th Legion, and it had become in time its grave. In the wake of Horus's death and the Loyalists' victory at Terra, Imperial High Command identified Chthoniya as a strategic and symbolic target. As early as 006 M31, Rogel Dorn, the Primarch of the Imperial Fist and the de facto master of Segmentum Solar's defenses, had authorized a targeted assault on the traitor homeworld. The force deployed was considerable. The 9th and 14th battalions of the Imperial Fist, the 13th Grand Company of the Space Wolves, and several remnants of Terran Imperial Army, and no fewer than 3 Solidates of Legio Custodi. These formidable strike forces were placed under the authority of Lord Castellan Evander Garius of the Imperial Fist. The Loyalist objective was the swift decapitation of the Sons of Horus's hold over their homeworld. The operation, known as the First Siege of Chthoniya, achieved a rapid success in its opening stages. The surface garrison of traitor forces was overwhelmed and forced to retreat, but the subterranean catacombs beneath the planet's scorched surface, vast, labyrinthian, and predating even the Great Crusade, became the staging grounds for an extended guerrilla war. Waged by surviving traitor elements, seemed victory remained elusive. It would be 7 solar years before the war for Chthonian ignited once again, this time with a fury magnitudes greater. In 013 M31, following the catastrophic defeat of Loyalist forces at Beta Garmin, a renewed traitor counteroffensive surged towards Chthonian. The invading armada, led by Vaharin Ashurandon, a senior commander of the former Sons of Horus, and backed by a coalition of dark alliances which included the Wordbearers, Alpha Legion operatives, and the remnants of the Chthonian headhunters drawn from traitor-aligned Solar Auxilia, along with corrupted Dark Mechanicum forces from the Forge World of Voss. Loyalist fleets stationed in orbit were caught off guard by the scale of this assault. Despite the rigorous preparation, the defenses were decisively defeated in orbit, leaving them distraught and destitute, allowing the traitor forces to initiate a full-scale planetary landing. What followed was the Second Siege of Chthonian. Lord Castellan Garius refused to yield, reinforced by loyalist elements from the Shattered Legions, leaving thousands of detachments that had remained loyal to the Imperium. His forces launched a brutal counterassault. The conflict itself was ruinous on both sides, as though the loyalists succeeded in inflicting catastrophic casualties that would be inexcusable on the traitor marines, they suffered equally grievous blows, with the loss of nearly their entire Titan contingent. By 014 M31, the war had descended into a grim stalemate. Traitor forces steadily gained territory, and Lord Castellan Garius prepared for a final stand at the Hive City, known as Traitor's Gate. Both sides readied for a climactic engagement, as a fleet belonging to the First Legion, the Dark Angels, arrived unexpectedly in orbit, commanded by Mudrak Cerdas. What followed was not diplomacy, but an ultimatum. Cedras, with the authority of the First Legion, ordered both loyalist and traitor forces to immediately cease hostilities and evacuate the planet. Any failure to comply would be met with total orbital annihilation. Neither side complied. In response, Cedras ordered a full bombardment of Chthonia's surface. Enraged by what had been viewed as treachery, Lord Castellan Garius retaliated, targeting the Dark Angel's capital ship with the planet's own defense lasers. The retaliation was ineffective. The First Legion's vessels weathered the attack with minimal damage. With negotiations abandoned, the Dark Angel's Dreadwing deployed to the surface. Under Cedra's command, they planted and detonated vortex bombs on key geologic fault lines, tearing simultaneous warp rifts that devastated the planet's core. The resulting annihilation was complete and total. Chthonian began to tear itself from within. Both traitor and loyalist commanders would then manage to evacuate, though it cost them tens of thousands of Astartes and human troops who had perished in the planetary collapse. The Sons of Horus, already broken, now had also lost their birthplace, as Chthonian was no more. Horus was weak. Horus was a fool. He had the whole galaxy and he let it slip. Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos Undivided. The fall of the War Master did not end with his death, as it merely began a darker chapter. In the aftermath of the Siege of Terra, as the Emperor was entombed within the Golden Throne, and Horus' lifeless body was left laying broken aboard the Vengeful Spirit, his legion fractured. First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon, hardened by the betrayal and loss, led the shattered remnants of the Sons of Horus in a desperate escape, fighting their way clear out of the Sol system. As they vanished into the void, the Imperium's response was swift and pitiless. In a campaign known to Imperial scholars as the Great Scouring, the Loyalist legions unleashed a merciless tide of wrathful retribution. Worlds that had sworn their allegiance to Horus were purged without exception, their populations made examples of to still loyal systems. The traitor legions were not simply pursued, they were hunted. From Segmentum Solar to the Eastern Fringe, they were driven from real space by wrathful crusades of retribution, of raging retribution. Fleeing annihilation, the Sons of Horus withdrew ever deeper into the Eye of Terror. Though they were not alone, across countless star systems, scattered wreckages of rebellion found sanctuary within the Imperium. Yet for the 16th Legion, sanctuary came at a heavy price. No longer the Emperor's favored, no longer Horus's chosen. The Sons of Horus entered the Eye as ghosts of their former selves, their numbers decimated, their purpose lost, and their unity tested, nearly shattered. Lacking their Primarch's guidance, the Legion began to spiral. Their captains turned to the warp in search of strength, bargaining with its gods, welcoming possession, and embracing the corrupted gifts of chaos, gifts that demanded tribute and sacrifice in return. Rival legions no longer united in cause. turned on one another in both desperation and bloodlust. The gods of the warp, ever watchful, twisted their broken suns to suit their own cosmic warfare. Legions that once threatened Terra were reshaped as tools for a war with no end. Amidst the collapse, Abaddon disappeared. His absence neither tactical nor strategic, it was personal. Grief-stricken and embittered, all the while repulsed by what his legion had become, Abaddon vanished into the depths of the Eye of Terror alone. The Sons of Horus, meanwhile, bore the body of Horus with them, preserved in stasis. The corpse of their godlike father was entombed within the demon world of Malium, a place of rust, decay, and ceaseless darkness. There, they constructed the Lupercal, a fortress raised from the corpses of void ships and the bones of warp beasts. The citadel stood as a monument to loss and obsession, built by a legion of enslaved mortals dragged from fallen Imperial worlds. Its towers and spires were forged from the prows of ancient, derelict vessels, each bearing the scars of forgotten wars. At the heart of the tomb fortress, beneath the chamber of spiraling white bone, Horus was laid to rest, his body suspended in a shaft of flickering golden light, silent and unchanged. Around him, the Legion carved their history into stone. Battles, glories, victories, long since turned to ash. Worship grew in place of leadership. Daily rituals were held within the chamber of their fallen god. Captains and warriors reciting oaths to a corpse that could no longer answer them. The leadership waned. Purpose dissolved. The Sons of Horus stagnated. Meanwhile, the warp pressed in. The Eye of Terror offered no peace, as demonic entities, sensing the Legion's weakness, descended upon them. Some resisted, many did not. Possession was common, minds and bodies twisted into hosts for the demonic. The line between man and monster and Astartes and aberration began to blur. The Sons of Horus, once the spear point of the Great Crusade, once the first of the rebellion, had become a shattered, leaderless cult of the dead. Their fortress was strong, but their purpose was gone. What would rise from these ruins remained unknown, but Abaddon had not vanished forever. Records recovered by archivist Malcor Thrain of the Ordos Chronos Investigative Division. In the years that followed the collapse of Horus's rebellion, the Sons of Horus endured not only defeat, but paralysis. While some in the 16th Legion advocated swearing their allegiance to a single patron, such proposals had ignited fierce opposition. Many remembered all too well the shackles placed upon them by the Emperor of Mankind, and refused to kneel again, be it to a man or god. That same defiant pride, once the fuel for their crusades, now chained them in place. They would bow to no entity outside their bloodline, not even to the immortal denizens of the warp. Lupercal stood as both a stronghold and a sarcophagus, forged from warp wreckage and shaped by madness and fury. It rose as a grim tomb over the grave world of Malium. At its core rested their preserved Primarch, interred beneath a towering crypt lit by Sorcerer's flame. Entry into this monument was heavily restricted, guarded, and sanctified. Even the other traitor legions, former brothers in arms, were barred from approaching the sarcophagus. The fortress served as a staging ground for raids against the Imperium, and for retaliatory strikes against rival legions, as the post-heresy order crumbled into what became known as the Legion Wars. These internecine conflicts, spurred by the fracturing of whatever unity chaos had implemented and imposed during the heresy, turned once allied legions into bitter enemies. Acts of sabotage, skirmishes, and slaughter tore throughout the entirety of the Eye of Terror, and few forces were spared this toll. The Sons of Horus, isolated and stagnant, became increasingly vulnerable. Their refusal to act left them as a tempting target. Amongst their own ranks, debate intensified. Some captains pressed for the replenishment of their gene stock, fretting not obliteration, that no bastion, no matter how formidable, could stand indefinitely without new warriors to man its walls. But their calls were largely dismissed. The majority believed that mastery over demonic possession would grant them the strength they required. They were convinced that through sorcery and the command of the warp, they could forge new warriors without the need for an apothecarian or progenoid. While the rest of the Eye of Terror burned in fratricidal war, The Sons of Horus raised their fortress ever higher, ritualizing the loss and glorifying death, sanctifying a corpse. They remained aloof from the Legion wars at large, consumed more by internal rites and veneration, but such isolation came at a cost. As whispers spread, the body of Horus, still intact and preserved, filled with the genetic legacy of a Primarch, became the focus of a myriad of dark schemes. To some it was a relic, to others a weapon, and to certain parties, a means of resurrection. In a sudden and devastating strike, the remnants of the Emperor's children launched a full-force assault on Malium. No warning, no mercy, empowered by the unholy allegiance to Slaanesh, and armed with the blessings of the foul sciences and warp energies, they breached the inner wall of the sanctum of the Lupercarius. There, in the very heart of the tomb, they defiled the sacred halls and stole the body of Horus from the stasis crypt. Then the raiders quickly vanished as rapidly as they had arrived. Most disturbing of all were persistent reports that the body was delivered to Fabius Bile, the infamous apothecary turned genetic butcher. Some within this ordo suspect that Bile's goal was not mere experimentation but rather rebirth, that he sought to clone the War Master, to forge from the flesh of old a new Horus, one unburdened by the feet, intended to unify the fractured traitorous legion. Under his command, all the while he would be controlled by Bile and those whom held his allegiance. To this day, the intent of this practice remains unconfirmed. However, it is known that in the smoking aftermath of Malium's desecration, the Sons of Horus found themselves truly shattered. Their once mighty fortress lay in ruins, and the 16th Legion teetered on the edge of extinction. Bereft of leadership, their brotherhood disintegrated into madness, some succumbing to nihilistic despair, others consumed with fury, would then in turn turn upon their own. The tenuous bonds between captains and the leadership as a whole unraveled into a bloody series of vendettas, murder becoming the Legion's final ritual. Their structure, that had once marched across the stars in unity, was now reduced to isolated enclaves of hate and hysteria. Then, amidst the wreckage of pride and ambition, came a figure long absent, Ezekiel Abaddon, first captain of the Luna Wolves and the War Master's last favored son. Veteran of countless campaigns, had returned after his self-imposed dark pilgrimage. He had arrived too late to prevent this catastrophe, but he had arrived early enough to witness its consequence. From afar, he surveyed the crumbling remnants of Malium, and what he saw was a moment that would reshape a legion. To Abaddon, there was no longer any question. Horus had truly failed. It was not the Imperium that had defeated them. It was the weakness of their fallen Primarch that had led to disgrace. In that final realization, it had all clicked. With a calculated fury, he descended into the ruins, but not as a savior, rather as a judge and executioner. One by one, he hunted down the surviving captains, silencing dissent with blade and bolter alike. Their screams echoed throughout the charred catacombs as he reclaimed leadership, not by decree, not by hierarchy, but rather by domination. When the bloodshed ceased, Abaddon alone remained amongst the Legion's former commanders, standing amidst ash and dust as he wiped his brow and he declared himself War Master of Chaos, a title once held by Horus Lupercal, but now reforged in Abaddon's image. His oath was not to restore the past, but to destroy it. He rejected the worship of Horus and swore to succeed where the Primarch had failed, in bringing low the so-called Corpse Emperor. Some of the Broken Legion bowed willingly. They saw in Abaddon the mantle of rightful succession. Others, fearing his wrath more than questioning his claim, submitted in silence. A few rejected him entirely, and they were either slain by their brethren or cast into the warp to die forgotten. With order restored through bloody will, Abaddon turned to his final rite of severance. The cloned Horus, a macabre copy engineered by Fabius Bile, still lived. To Abaddon, this represented the chains of a failed legacy. In a decisive strike, he led an assault on the Emperor's children, obliterating the body of Horus and slaying the genetic facsimile with his own lightning claw, a weapon that had now slain 2 Primarchs and wounded the Emperor, donning the weapon for himself. In doing so, he purged the last vestiges of the Legion's old identity. Symbolically and literally, the transformation followed. The Sons of Horus stripped their Viridian armor, repainting it black, the hue of mourning, defiance, and vengeance. The name Sons of Horus was also cast aside, In its place rose a new force, the Black Legion. No longer would they be chained and shackled by the shadow of a fallen god. The Black Legion emerged reborn, united under Abaddon's iron rule. The Despoiler's message was unmistakable. The traitor legions were not relics of the past, but architects of the future. His Black Legion would lead, and the galaxy would kneel. And so, when the banners of chaos were once more raised, when the warbands converged within the wrathful eye of Abaddon the Despoiler, he would unleash a Black Crusade. One phrase would resound like a war chant across the ranks of the damned. Let the galaxy burn. Who pledged his loyalty? The War Master. Whom did we serve? The War Master. From who did we take our name? The War Master. Who was denied to us? The War Master. But whom shall we remake? The War Master. And who shall lead us to victory? The War Master. With the command of the Legion now absolute, Abaddon the Despoiler did not hesitate. He began his task of reforging the 16th Legion, not only in name, but in number. The Black Legion, as it was now called, would not linger in memory or rot in shadows. It would grow, it would strike, and it would conquer. Word spread swiftly, howling across the depths of the Eye of Terror. Any Space Marine, regardless of Legion, who bent the knee to the Despoiler would be granted a place within the Black Legion, and with it share his vision of retribution against the Imperium. For many, this offer was not merely temptation, it was a promise, a chance to reclaim purpose in a galaxy that had long since abandoned meaning. Their responses were varied. Some mocked him, veterans of the Long War, embittered and prideful, derided Abaddon as nothing more than a usurper, a shadow pretending to cast one. They whispered that he was playing at being War Master, a title they believed died with Horus, but not all were so dismissive. Amongst the traitor legions, a slow, festering hunger had taken root. Centuries of interscene warfare, the futility of raiding, and the hollow gift of the warp had left most disillusioned. The promise of order, unity, and vengeance spoke louder than mockery. For these warriors, the defeat that they had suffered during the heresy still burned like a brand. They remembered the sting of betrayal and the fires of defeat at the hands of the loyalist legions. Now a leader stood ready to strike back, and not as a pawn of the gods, but as a conqueror with a vision. Others came with darker reasons. Some traitor warbands cared little for ideology or revenge. They came because Abaddon led them to slaughter, to plunder, to destruction without end. For them, the Black Legion offered endless campaigns, a chance to make worlds scream. Blood was currency, and Abaddon, the chief banker of death, promised in abundance. And then there were those who respected only strength. To those merciless warriors, Abaddon's might, wrath, and command were the only arguments that mattered. They saw his rise, the corpse of his rival champions strewn in his wake, and deemed him worthy. In a realm where weakness is a death sentence, Abaddon was undeniable. His legend grew faster than his army, but with power comes challenge. Many sought to use the Black Legion as a tool for their own ambitions. Champions of chaos infiltrated his ranks, weaving lies of false pledges, whispering corruption into the ears of those who had sworn loyalty. Others tried to fracture his command, offer forbidden power, or secret pacts in the dark. None survived. Each betrayer was hunted down and punished with ruthless precision. The Despoiler's response was not simply execution, it was an extermination. As the heads of Chaos Lords and demon-bound champions were nailed as war trophies within his own hall, their warbands were shattered and their fortresses reduced to rubble and ash. He left no ambiguity. Betrayal would be met with annihilation. Treachery would not be tolerated, only crushed. Over time, only the truly deranged, self-terminationally arrogant defied him. Thus, the foundation for the Black Legion was laid, not in ideal, but in fire, blood, and uncompromising will. Through it all, the Black Legion's catechism echoed throughout their ranks in a heartbeat. Who shall lead us to victory? The War Master. As the Black Legion's ranks swelled, Abaddon turned his fury outwards. With his fleet, he carved a path through the Eye of Terror, enslaving, conscripting, and conquering worlds. Aboard the Vengeful Spirit, the same battle barge once commanded by Horus himself, Abaddon orchestrated wars not only against the Imperium, but against rival traitor factions and demonic princelings. In time, his personal war host grew into a force that could rival the legions of old. Yet for all his ambition, Abaddon understood the nature of the traitor legions, fractured, distrustful, and volatile. No warlord could hope to rule them, but perhaps unite them. This was the vision, a goal not of an empire, but of destruction. He called it the Long War, a campaign not of months, not of years, but of eras. A war not to conquer but to annihilate, to finish what Horus had begun, to succeed where Horus had failed. Terra would burn, the Imperium would be cast down, and the corpse upon the Golden Throne would be finally unseated. Thus, the Age of Retribution began. Across M32 to M39, the Long War persisted, each generation of the Imperium facing more and more incursions, each invasion more brutal than the last. Administratum records show a steady increase in incursions traced to the Eye of Terror, with each passing decade confirming what so many had feared. The Despoiler was not finished, he was just beginning, and his crusades would be the stuff of legends.